actually, if you look around the country, they do have programs, unfortunately. Well, they will take a student, look at their race, say, okay, you're white, you're an oppressor. If you're black, you're oppressed. And think about what that does to a 6 or 7-year-old kid. That's wrong. You're seeing that. You have people that are teaching, and actually his running mate has said this in the past, that teaching the United States was built on stolen land. That is inappropriate for our schools. It's not true.
In his latest attack on public education in the state of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, with the help of his Republican-run state government, has created a censorship council that will retrain public school librarians on new education restrictions. I'm Yasmin Khan with Rebel HQ, and this censorship council has been staffed with none other than anti-science, anti-mask conspiracy theorists who are actively calling for book bans.
There is zero reason for somebody that cannot purchase a pack of cigarettes to be learning that filth.
In other words, these are the last people who should have any say in the public education system, and they definitely shouldn't have any authority to tell school librarians how to do their jobs. The state's education department had initially stated that the council would be staffed with candidates from local school districts, but instead, right-wing activists were placed on the council, with at least one, according to reporting from the Daily Beast, being nominated a week before the education department publicly called for candidates. Now, all of this, by the way, is being done in the name of, quote, curriculum transparency. But the process of implementing this so-called transparency has itself been less than transparent. Here's what happened. Back on August 12th of this year, the Florida Education Department released a memo for school districts to nominate parents of students for a work group that would create mandatory training for school librarians outlining new library censorship rules. Now, again, these are just parents. They are not necessarily people with any background in public education. That said, the ED passed on nearly 100 nominees who actually did have some relevant experience, instead filling the spots with conspiracy theorists. The Daily Beast article mentions one woman in particular, Michelle Beavers, who nominated herself for the council on the laurels of her right-wing activism.
There is no book list right now, so if a book is in one school, only one school, it goes back to the school level, which means that school will reviews it instead of the school district board that you're going to put together for review. If it gets removed from that one school, does that mean it goes on a list and all schools don't get it then? Because it sounds like you're putting it just back on one school, which means the other librarians can then order that book.
She's anti-LGBT, anti-mask, anti-critical race theory, which, just to remind everyone, isn't actually being taught in public schools, and she's pro-book bans. Here's the part that got me, though. Beavers is opposed to a program that would allow parents to opt out of restricting book access to their kids. The existence of the program seems to suggest that these book-banning MAGA moms are the minority inflicting their views on a majority. According to the Florida Freedom to Read Project, data from Flagler County, one of the book-banning hotspots, reports that out of approximately 13,000 K-12 students in the county, only 19 children, or 0.15% of students, have restricted library access thanks to the opt-out program. Similar patterns are evident across the state. Now, Beavers, in her opposition to this opt-out, opt-in program, issued a statement that was riddled with grammatical errors. She said, quote, "These books violate the law. It's a felony. So why would you try and still defend their existence by letting parents opt out?" And yes, of course she used the wrong form of "there" for any of you wondering. Now, I know people don't like grammar police, but how dare you assume any role in public education when you can't even grasp the basics of literacy in an education-related document? How can you expect anyone to take you or your ideas seriously? She is the prime example of someone who literally needs to read more books. Instead, she's trying to bring an entire generation down to her level. Now, part of me is sorry if that makes me sound elitist, but a bigger part of me thinks that we've already let education standards fall way too low in this country. We're not even talking about higher education here, which is exclusionary and expensive. We're talking about public school systems and free libraries. I learned the different forms of there, and there in elementary school. This is not high-level stuff. But speaking of literacy, let's talk about literacy. As a result of pandemic-era lockdowns, math scores on standardized tests in the United States fell in nearly every state, and literacy also struggled. The results looked at 4th and 8th grade students. In reading, only 2 states saw proficiency levels exceeding 40%, 4th graders and 8th graders in Massachusetts and 8th graders in New Jersey. Nationwide in math, only 26% of 8th graders were deemed proficient, down from 34% in 2019. 34%, by the way, is still terrible. Of 4th graders, only 36% were found to be proficient in math, down from 41%. Now, that was expected, or it should have been, as classrooms across the nation were disrupted. Still, teachers did their best to manage the situation despite facing opposition from politically driven groups at every turn. Even when classrooms were reopened, teachers had to deal with anti-mask parents and government intervention in schools. They had to deal with unruly children with lower attention spans, and they had to deal with accusations of teaching critical race theory in classrooms. They had to deal with the constant threat of school shootings and a lack of meaningful government action to help protect themselves and their students. Now they're dealing with book bans and having their curriculum scrutinized by conspiracy theorists, racists, and religious extremists. Combine all of the above with low teacher pay, and you have a situation where, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, 44% of public schools are reporting teaching vacancies at the start of the 2022 school year. Over half of those vacancies are due to resignations. The education industry is not attracting or retaining talent, at least not the talent that most parents would want it to attract or retain. Parents are looking for alternatives to the public school system, such as homeschooling or private schooling, but both of those are expensive in their own ways, and the truth is, parents shouldn't feel as though they have to resort to those alternatives. Many state and local governments aren't helping either. In fact, many of them are doing nothing, or they're actively making things worse. I don't have kids, but my friends that do here in Texas have received DNA kits that were issued by the state to help parents identify their kids after they've been killed in the school shooting. They still haven't taken any meaningful steps to prevent those school shootings, at least none that aren't politically motivated and none that are actually in the best interests of the students and faculty. What will this mean for our nation going forward? I don't know, we'll have to see. But it can't be a good thing to have an entire generation's education stunted during critical points in their development. Yes, we had a pandemic, but many of these problems we're facing are of our own making, and many of them were brewing long before the pandemic. For a right wing that claims to care so much about our children, they sure are not acting like it. All right, that is it for me. If you got anything out of this content, please like and subscribe, and be sure to follow me over on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you.